welcome to the Life of Elvis podcast. I'm your host, Elvis, and today I've got a great guest. He's a physician, author, public speaker, retired Army colonel, and a wrestler. So, Skip Mondragon, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you, Elvis. I'm delighted to be here with you, my friend.
Likewise, good to see you again.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I am well. I'm doing very well, Elvis. Thank you.
Great. So let's start from the beginning, and so my listeners can get to know you a little bit. So tell me your story.
Very good. Well, I'm the third of 8 children, born of Hispanic parents of very humble means. Grew up in Denver, Colorado. My father went to the Korean War and unfortunately came back a broken man. My mother, my aunt, his older sister, my older cousins tell me the man that went to war was not the man that came home. He suffered from PTSD, bipolar disorder, and came back as an alcoholic. And when he drank, he was violent. My oldest sister, Roma, she tells us that when he would come home, we'd run and hide because we didn't know which dad was coming home, the kind, loving, gentle dad or the violent, angry dad. Well, as things went on, my mother eventually divorced him, but during those intervening years, I was later would find out just how abusive he was toward my mother, but she never badmouthed him. So I basically grew up without a father. And I was typically the smallest kid in my class. I was bullied a lot. I was shy. I was socially awkward, physically awkward. I failed at every sport. Football, baseball, basketball, gymnastics. I didn't know how to run. I didn't know how to throw a ball, catch a ball, kick a ball. I tell people I failed. I'm sorry?
Reminds me of myself, to be honest.
I failed at tetherball, for those of you who know what tetherball is. But in 8th grade, I discovered wrestling. And it was the first time I ever had this sense. I think I can be good at this after a few practices. And then I think I can really be good at this. I made the varsity team as the only 8th grader in junior high. And although I was on the varsity team, I didn't win a match that year. The next year, I happened to be the best wrestler in the room. Still didn't win a match because I'd get so anxious and worked up the night before a match, I couldn't sleep. So I'd be physically and emotionally exhausted when I get out on the mat. But the summer following, I entered a freestyle tournament. Freestyle, one of the 2 Olympic styles. And I won my first match in the tournament. I won my second match in the tournament. I won my 3rd match in the tournament. I won the 4th match. I'm going for the championship. And I win it. After the tournament, my coach asked, "Do you know who that kid is that you wrestled?" I had no idea, coach. He said, "Well, he won this tournament last year." And that just further cemented my love for this great sport. I went on to an illustrious high school career, honorable mention All-American, 2-time district champion, state runner-up. But in that time, I won multiple state freestyle wrestling tournaments, placed at 2 national freestyle tournaments. Fast forward, college, went on to medical school, and in college is where I met my sweetheart. We celebrated 40 years of marriage this year. 5 kids, 26 and a half years in the Army, suffered major depression my last year in the Army. And retired from the Army at the end of 2014. Worked at a few jobs. I haven't worked now since last year, getting ready to go back to work part-time. So you mentioned speaking. I love to share. I speak about my story. Even tough guys get depressed. I've written a book about that. It's called Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps. And I took up the wrestling again at the age of 56. back when I was still in the Army, and trained with my youngest son, my 18-year-old. He helped me, and we went on and won a national veterans championship. So that tells you a little bit about my story. I mentioned raising the 5 kids. We have 4 grandchildren. And I speak, I write, and I'm getting ready to give a TEDx talk in early December in Vancouver. And the title of my talk is Tough Guys Are an Endangered Species.
Yeah, that's very true. So what drew you to wrestling?
The thing I think that drew me to wrestling were the fact that it's one-on-one and that I didn't have to compete against boys that were so much bigger than me. Being small, that finally there was this level playing field. I didn't have to compete against these boys that were much larger than I was. I was in the lowest wrestling class, the 85-pound division. And so for once, I could compete against boys that were my own size. I think that, and the fact that you were out there one-on-one, face-to-face, hand-to-hand, and it was all up to you. That has its advantages, and that has its disadvantages, because there you are, win or lose, it's all on you. So the victory out there, or boy, it's you lose, and there you are all by yourself out on that mat, shaking hands with your opponent, and your opponent's hands gets raised. Or when you win, shaking hands with your opponent, and your hand gets raised by the referee. So there's no other sport that's like it, that combat sport, overcoming your fear of your opponent, making sure you don't go in overconfident to face that opponent, but don't go in fearing your opponent. So you go in with a healthy respect for your opponent. I think it was all those elements that I fell in love with, plus the fact that you saw all shapes of wrestlers. You saw the skinny wrestler. You saw the real muscular wrestler. You saw the guy that just looked normal. And out of any of those shapes, you could have amazing wrestlers. Sometimes you just saw the guy that, didn't look like much of anything physically. And they'd go out there and crush guys on the mat. Sometimes you'd see the real physical looking guy, and he'd go out there and crush guys. Sometimes you'd see these real physical guys get crushed by the real skinny guy. So you saw the combinations, and any one of them could be a great wrestler and beat any one of the others. And so it was a mental game, it was a physical game, relied on technique, but it also came down to what I call the G factor, guts, that inner quality that when things are so hard and your lungs are burning, your muscles are aching, and just everything in you is just saying, just quit, just stop, don't push any harder. You refuse to give up. You just keep pushing relentlessly. That whether that's in practice when everything in you just doesn't want to go any harder, whether you're scrimmaging or at the end of practice conditioning and the coach is making you do burpees or wind sprints and everything hurts so bad, all you want to do is stop. And you say, no, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to push, and I'm going to push a little bit harder. And out on the mat, when that third period comes around, and again, everything aches and burns and hurts. And your mind is saying, just stop. And you dig down deep and you say, no, I'm not giving up. So it brings that out of you.
Yeah,
I think those are
true.
things I love about the sport.
Yeah. It's very true what you were just saying about the G factor. And it's something that people need a lot more in their lives these days. Like you said, tough guys are sorry, endangered species now. And it's really important to be able to push yourself just like that, not just in sports, physically, but also mentally. When you're trying to start a business or achieve something, academic, write a book, you really need to be able to push yourself like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the problems we face, perhaps, especially in some of the younger generations, I'm sorry to say, because of the way they've been raised, that things have been made too easy for them. We've had the so-called helicopter parents who have done everything to help their children succeed. And so they haven't let children succeed, work hard and fail. Failure is part of life. And everybody's a winner on a sports team. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody doesn't get a trophy in life. Everybody doesn't win in life. Everybody doesn't get the job. Everybody doesn't get the promotion. Everybody doesn't get the award. That's the reality of life. And when you don't learn how to face adversity and don't learn how to face failure, when you're faced with that adversity or you're faced with failure on a bigger stage, if you will, in things of life, I think people can find that crushing, because then they don't know how to rebound from that. Oh my gosh, what do I do? My life is falling apart. No, it's not. This is part of life. You go back, you reevaluate, you pick yourself up. You may have to seek advice or whatever from others. You get input, of course, but you learn to pick yourself up and brush yourself off and say, okay, I'm gonna get back up. And that's one of the great things about something like wrestling. You're going to find yourself on your back at times, and you got to learn to get back up. You might even find yourself pinned. I didn't get pinned, but rarely in my career, very, very rarely. But in those times, you get yourself back up and you get ready for your next match. Life is going to knock you on your back, and you have to learn to get back up. That's the reality. You know that.
Yeah,
I know
definitely.
that. You and I were talking offline, and we were talking how this past year has been such a difficult year, or the last couple of years have been very, very difficult years. But you got yourself back up, and you're, rebuilding your life again. You're doing those things necessary because you've decided, I'm not going to wallow in this. I'm not going to here. I know how to get back up and get back in the game of life.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the last month or so, when a lot of changes happened, I basically had two options. When I thought about it, one option was giving to some of my old conditioning, and just like maybe 5-6 years ago, just feel down, not get back up, really get a bit depressed. So that was one option, feel sorry for myself, and the other option was to, pick up the wake-up call. It was basically life telling me, like, come on, you monkey, get your shit together. And really to go all out on every front. And this podcast is, shows which path I chose.
Yes, and I'm so proud of you, Elvis, that's the path you chose. There's a lot of people that wouldn't have the courage and would take the easy way out, and you said, no way, I'm not doing it. I'm going to get back up, get in there and do things there and help others, because what you were telling me, that's what this podcast is all about, to give back and to help others.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially the last 5-6 years or so, after I moved out from Slovakia, I've learned a lot. I've been through a lot, and now that I got my wake up call, it's like, right, time to really put everything into practice and work on stuff. So, also when I was younger, kind of like you, I used to be also like a pretty weak kid, probably one weakest one in the class, really. And also got picked up on at school because, your name is Elvis. The kids are going to make fun of you. Can't help it, can't get around it. Right? So, over the last few months, I've been thinking a lot about myself and about my past, and I figured out that the dynamics that I had at school or at home, they kind of made me withdraw from people, be a little bit more quiet, and I've finally figured out what the reasons for it. And so when I was in my early teens, I found Jean-Claude Van Damme, Bruce Lee, and I saw, their energy and what they stood for and what they accomplished in their lives. And I guess they had what I didn't have back then. Right, this strength and I mean, if you see Bruce Lee or Van Damme, you'll know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
That's what got me into martial arts, just like you did wrestling. I started training karate, aikido, and later Bruce Lee's martial art. And that was tremendous help. So
yeah. And the interesting thing about both of those men, John Claude Van and Bruce Lee, neither are very big men. Are both small men.
Yeah, roughly my size, and Jean-Claude Van Damme also used to get picked on. Was a pretty weak kid. So
yeah. So you see him on the screen, you think, "Oh, this guy must be big," and then you find out, no, he's not a big man.
Yeah, exactly. And we tend to put people like these who accomplish tremendous things, put them on a pedestal and say they're different, they're freaks, or they're some kind of a freak, and they're special. I would never be able to do that. But thanks to them, when I was younger, one of the main messages I got from them is that you can do it. You can achieve anything you want, really. Now, I had this in my mind for years on a more conscious level, but it didn't sink in all the way to a subconscious. So I realized that was one of the things that was holding me back. But the fact that I consciously knew this, that whatever they achieved, I can or you can achieve, that was tremendous help for me throughout the years.
Absolutely. I know for me, one of the folks that inspired me back early in my career was Dan Gable. Dan is perhaps the best known wrestler in the US and certainly is known throughout the world. Dan had an illustrious career, was undefeated in junior high, undefeated in high school, undefeated in college until his last match he wrestled in college. And he was wrestling a wrestler who came down in weight, Larry Owings. And Larry had said, "I'm going to beat Dan Gable." And sure enough, they met at the NCAA Division I finals, and Larry Owings beat him in a very close match. And that spurred Dan to train even more like a madman. And that was for the 72 Olympics. And I'm friends with some of the guys that, at least two of the men, one in particular, two brothers, Ben and John Peterson, know John Peterson very well. Friends for almost 20 years now. And John talks about, because they were teammates for that, for the 72 Olympics, at Gable trained like a madman. They'd have, 2 practices a day. It just, in the evenings, everybody's just worn out and trying to relax. And Dan Gable would come in and say, "All right, who wants to go out for a run?" They're like, "No, Dan, we're not going out for any more exercise here." But he just, and then his sister got murdered. I think he was in college at the time, early in his college career, and he dedicated that gold medal to his sister. And when he went to the Olympics, he was unscored upon. The Russians said they were going to find somebody to beat him, and they brought a wrestler in that went down a weight class to wrestle Dan, and couldn't beat Dan. He didn't have a point scored upon him in the Olympics. Then he went on to a legendary coaching career. I think he won something like 15 or 16 national titles for the University of Iowa as a coach. I think it was legendary. So he is very well known. He actually was awarded the National Presidential Award of Freedom by President Trump. Yeah, so very well known.
Nice.
Very exceptional man. So that's the man that, when early in my career, when I was a kid, like, oh, Dan Gable, yeah.
Yeah, sounds like a good role model to have. Yeah,
So,
yeah. Go on.
No, go on.
Oh, I want to say that it's tremendous help to have someone to look up to, someone who's a really good leader and accomplish some great things in their lives.
Amen. Indeed. Indeed.
So what do you want to say?
I was going to say, where would you like to go? We had talked offline about looking at some things. Let's touch upon trauma just for a minute, because you had the fact that we have in common bullying, and that's traumatic in of itself. And
you also mentioned that at some point in your life you were struggling with depression. Mm-hmm. So tell me more about that. Like
depression.
What was the cause of it?
Well, the year before, in 2013, problems arose in my Department of Medicine. I fixated on these problems, and insomnia ensued. Negative thoughts just began to beat me up. You don't deserve to be a colonel. You let your department down. You let your family down. You're a failure. You're a fake. And they would just batter my mind day in and day night. Just this endless loop. I lost my confidence. I became indecisive. My mentation was off. Trouble concentrating. Felt God was distant. It seemed like my prayers bounced off the ceiling. I withdrew. I was avoiding interacting with others. My mood became progressively blue. Aches and pains got worse from old injuries and osteoarthritis. My sex drive was, talk about kicking a guy when he's down. Everything there, I just sank into this deep, dark pit. And to make things worse, I had 3 surgeries in 7 months, and that just made everything worse. And it got to the point where in 2014, it was April 17, 2014, seemed like a normal day. Got up after a horrible night's sleep, got ready quickly, had my devotions, quick breakfast, prayer with my wife. I was out the door because I was left early to get to the Eisenhower Army Medical Center in Fort Gordon, Georgia. Got there, went to my office. Nobody else was on the whole floor. Unlocked the door, opened, turned on the lights, stepped inside, and then everything just came crashing down on me. I locked the door behind me, turned off the lights, closed the blinds, turned off my phones. I crawled up under my desk in a fetal position on that musty carpet. And for 4 hours, I kept asking myself, Skip, what are you doing? Skip, how did you get here? You're a tough guy. You're a colonel, a national wrestling champion. You spent 2 years in combat zones. What happened? And then I became this doctor patient. And all these feelings and thoughts collide. It's all this trauma. Trauma is cumulative. It's not just you have trauma here. It's trauma from the childhood, from your teen years, raising children, taking care of soldiers, mangled and dying soldiers, deaths from family members. All these time, I spent 3.5 years away from my family during deployments. So all these accumulated traumas. And then the past 9 months, what had gone on, it just came crashing down upon me. And I began slowly to put the pieces together. Insomnia, withdrawal, loss of confidence, indecisiveness, impaired cognition, increased aches and pains, withdrawal, avoidance of interacting with others, impaired sex drive. So
all signs of depression.
Exactly. And so finally, I tell myself, Skip, you're depressed. Go get help. And later that day, a clinical psychologist diagnosed me with major depression.
Mm-hmm.
So I got help. I was involved with a clinical psychologist, my primary care physician, psychiatrist, all receiving care from them, and tender, loving care from my family, my friends. So you need a team. When you're struggling like that, you need a team.
Yeah, definitely. What helped you get through it most?
Well, I was working, there are a few things, Elvis. I call it my F3. Family, friends, and faith. But I needed help from professionals, first and foremost.
Yeah.
That I was so beat up, beaten down, and broken, I needed that professional help. And I was seeing a clinical psychologist that I'll be forever indebted to, Lieutenant Colonel Mike Perry. And we hit it off. We had a lot of things in common. And I met with Mike weekly, and I was undergoing a type of therapy called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And basically a type of therapy where you're retraining your mind. I was so beat down. My confidence was in the toilet, indecisive. In fact, I remember telling Mike early on in one session, I expected my career to end with a bang instead of a whimper, because I felt like that's the way my career was going to end. And he told me, sir, I don't think that's the case. There are so many good things you accomplished and so many things you can be proud of. And he worked with some exercises with me. For instance, I want you to look at three episodes of your life, or 3 times of your life, if you break it into 3 there, all the accomplishments. Or another thing, I want you to go back and write 10 major accomplishments you've done in your army, during the course of your army. I want you to look at the people that you've helped during your army career and things of this sort. I want you to develop some mantras to help reinforce your health and well-being. Various activities like this to rebuild my mind, rebuild my confidence. And week by week, he worked with me. I mentioned my psychiatrist and primary care provider. I was on medications. I had a thorough evaluation from my primary care physician to make sure I didn't have any other underlying conditions that could contribute to depression, hypothyroidism, so thyroid disease, heart problems, diabetes, things of this sort that certainly can contribute to depression. I was receiving tender, loving care from my family, especially my wife. I had my youngest brother who regularly called me if we'd talk. My mother, they were the two primary ones for my family. My sister, Margot, my younger sister, I should say, regularly sent me cards. So I had family that were interacting. I had friends who would touch base with me, and then my faith. And those things, I think, were the things that helped the most. Then practical things. I had to get my sleep under control. My insomnia got so bad that I could be up and down through the night 6, 8, 10 times a night. There were nights I felt where I basically didn't get any sleep, or at best a couple hours. And the nights I could fall asleep, bing, I'd wake up in a couple hours, be wide awake, quick back to sleep. So I had to get the sleep back under control. And then, of course, I always kept up with my exercise, tried to eat a healthy diet. All those things are essential. And then, getting that interaction with others, that socialization, all these things. Plus, I had cut myself off from nature. I didn't get outside like I normally would. I didn't get out in the sun. I didn't just spend time sitting out on my back deck of my house, enjoying the trees, the birds, the flowers. I just didn't go out, avoided it. I closed the sunroof on my car, things of that sort. I just withdrew from so many things, and the world just got smaller and darker and darker. So all these things I had to rebuild back into my life.
Yeah, honestly, if someone's listening that has similar problems, these points that you brought up, like exercising, going out into nature, getting sleep, that's great. Obviously, talking to your friends, family, getting help from professionals, that's tremendous advice one can follow. Because I also had times when I wouldn't say I was full on depressed like where you did. I've kind of like just before I got to the state where I was, it could be like a major problem, I bounced back. So I can't say that I was seriously depressed at any point in my life. Getting there, but not there yet. Like I said, I managed to always bounce back. Yeah, it's like you get stuck in a rut, your habits, and you don't enjoy the novelty in life anymore.
Right.
And even just recently, I've noticed a few weeks ago, like I've got things that I'm very interested in, that I just enjoy listening to and learning about. And that morning, I opened up YouTube because I like to watch certain channels on there, mystery bio, something, Elon Musk, all my favorite things. But that day I opened up the app and looked for the subscriptions, and just didn't feel like it. It didn't bring me any pleasure. For a while, I didn't watch anything that I was actually interested in. And at that point, I realized, I think you're getting a little bit depressed here.
Yeah.
But fortunately, shortly after that, things changed a lot.
Good.
I realized a lot of things, and so I'm making positive changes. And getting enough sleep, healthy diet, getting out into nature, all that stuff. That's essentially the minimum everyone should be doing. Because if you're not doing those things, which are great help, that you're not giving yourself a chance to fight, really.
Yeah, and you touched upon something, that loss of pleasure in things, because that's also what I had.
Yeah.
You know, things just didn't excite me there. For instance, amateur wrestling, you know, that's been an integral part of my life since I was a kid. I follow it, I watch it, I read about it, I get magazines on it.
Mm-hmm.
I had no interest in it. I coach, you know, I had no interest in it whatsoever. Like, it just didn't excite me. And that's another cardinal symptom of depression. So you touched upon that. The other thing I wanted to mention that you triggered as you were talking about that was this idea, and I think you a roundabout alluded to that, is this idea that prevention trumps rehab. In fact, I write about that in a chapter in my book. Prevention always trumps rehab. And that the importance of learning to keep tabs on where are we in terms of our emotional stores. And I think especially as men, because we have become so divorced from our feelings. In many cases, simply because the way we've been raised. Don't be a crybaby. Don't be a sissy. Be a man. Real men don't cry. So you stuff our feelings down, and we lose contact with them. In fact, there's a psychologist by the name of Ronald Levant, and he coined this term called normative male alexithymia. And normative male alexithymia means feelings without words. It simply means men don't know how to identify, express, and share their feelings. We've lost connection with how we feel, much less how to share that and connect with other men. We don't know how to do that as men. And that gets us into trouble. So prevention always trumps rehab. And if we can learn to take inventory, what are our emotional stores like? What are our social stores? What does that bank account look like? Our spiritual stores, our physical, and know where we're at and how we need to replenish those. Me, I was utterly depleted on all fronts. And it took me becoming so depleted that I end up curled up in that fetal position, laying on a musty carpet. And 4 hours of intense examination to finally come to understand, oh, I'm depressed. Go get help. Now think about that. I'm a physician. I'm trained in this area. But because of this tough guy persona, the fact that I'm a wrestler, I'm a colonel, I'm a soldier, I've been in combat zones, I'm a caretaker, all these things, I could not step back and see and put it together. I'm depressed. Instead, it's this wrestler mentality, this tough guy mentality. Keep pushing, keep working, keep pushing, keep digging deep with that G factor, keep working harder. And the harder I push, the worse I got. And so we have to learn how to assess where we're at. And then how can we replenish those stores so we don't end up where I ended up. And you look at the statistics, men die by suicide over 3.5 times as often as women. That should be telling us something. We have a problem, men.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things about Western culture. Prevention, yeah, it's many times non-existent. Whether it comes to medicine, for example, I mean, being a physician, he's not going to tell you how to prevent any of those diseases. They are basically managing diseases rather than trying to prevent you getting some. At the end of the day, most of the diseases people are suffering from on the planet, but it's cancer, diabetes, even depression. They are all preventable, and it's in Lao Tzu's book, Tao Te Ching. It's 2,500 years old, that book. And he says, you need to, no, I'm paraphrasing, we need to sort out problems when they are still small, not when they are big. And
Absolutely.
over here, we kind of fail to understand that on an individual scale, when it comes to like people's lifestyles, but also on a grand scale, when we look at what humanity is doing to a planet, no prevention there, and now suddenly now things are getting worse, and what do we do now?
Right. Absolutely. It's much
Yeah,
easier to solve it when it's small than when
yeah,
it's big. And it would have been much easier to,
yeah. But for that, you need awareness. Yeah, that's a crucial point.
yes,
Yeah,
awareness. And I talk about this also in my book, that importance of mindfulness, that importance of, getting in touch with who you are. And so being in touch here and savoring the moment, becoming aware of how you're feeling and how you're interacting with others and what's going on around you. Something as simple as, when I take this drink, I can savor the taste, the heat, how it feels on my tongue and my palate, just going down, rather than just
yeah,
mindlessly taking a drink, but to savor it and enjoy it. Something as simple as that. And if we can learn to be more in tune with ourselves, oh, that's how I'm feeling. Oh, that's why I'm reacting like that. Uh, and when we interact with others, being present. So I'm really listening. I talk about when I teach medical students and residents that we have to learn to listen with our eyes, our ears, and our heart. So there's a lot of things in regards to that, becoming aware.
yeah, definitely. I I personally consider myself a bit more aware person, but even then, like I do meditation and all those things, trying to live healthy. But even then, just recently I realized how many things are just eluded me. I
Mm,
kind of knew it was there, but I still didn't realize fully what was going on.
mm,
And to be honest,
sure.
what helped me recently, do you know Gabor Mate and
Oh,
his
yes,
work?
I've heard of Gabi
Yeah,
Mate. Yeah,
good guy.
Gabor Mate. Hmm.
Yeah, I used to listen to him in the past, about a long break where I didn't. And just recently I started listening to him again, and that helped me a lot.
Hmm.
Especially his method of compassionate inquiry, where you simply um, ask yourself when you get certain behavior, why is this happening? And it's not
Mm.
like, why the hell are you doing? There's not really that question, but you really try to figure out what's going on. And at the end, the truth liberates you.
Mm.
And so that's what helped me a lot. Like I realized that I was also a bit withdrawn, quiet, which didn't help me with connecting to people and
Mm.
pursuing what my
Hmm.
um, what's the purpose of my life? And so I started like thinking about it. Why do I act like this? What caused it? And at the end, I traced it back to my childhood. When kids at school were bullying me. So my defense mechanism was to withdraw from them, not be seen, so I would avoid the hurt. So this kind of compassion inquiry is tremendously valuable. It should be taught at schools. Well, of course, they won't teach you something like this. So that was tremendously helpful for me.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the lessons we've learned from, and we already talked some of this about from athletics, from sports.
Yeah.
I talked about that G factor.
Yeah.
And you understand that from martial arts and some of the activities you engage in. This idea of dealing with failure. That was the other thing we touched upon, because life inevitably brings with it failure. We're not always going to win. We need to learn to get back up.
Yeah, that's a big failure. But the thing is, with schools, for example, they tell you if you fail, it's a bad thing. That's basically what they teach you at schools. So people are generally afraid, because they will get shit from the teacher or from the parents. They gain the message that to fail is a bad thing. You can't fail. They're afraid what their parents or friends will think of them if they fail. But there's not many teachers that are just that good as failing. You fail, then you have to think, okay, what did I do wrong? What do I need to do better next time? It's a great teacher.
It is indeed. You look at some of the world's greatest entrepreneurs. They've had plenty of failures.
Yeah.
And some of the great scientists of the past, how many failures before they finally were able to perfect what they were working on. So many things were fraught with failure before they succeeded. That's the reality. You think about when we learn to walk. How many times as babies do we fall down before we learn to walk? Think about learning to tie your shoes. How many times do you fail? All these things, riding a bike. If you can remember learning to ride a bike, how many times?
Yeah.
Before you learn to ride that bike. Whether it's even throwing a baseball or doing something before you learn to do it, how many times do you fail? That's the reality of life. We fail before we succeed, and that's okay. There's also that determination that, okay, I'm just going to keep working at this, showing up consistently and working. The importance of having a coach. That you need people speaking into your life that help you. So when I was severely depressed, I looked at, in retrospect, my clinical psychologist as my coach. I looked at, in a sense, my wife and family members and my friends as coaches, because one of the things that a coach does in wrestling, and we talked about this, especially with young wrestlers, is they're standing in that corner reminding you, keep your head up. In wrestling, when your head goes down, you are vulnerable. You make yourself vulnerable to be attacked by your opponent. When you're on your feet, to be taken down to the mat, or if you're on the mat and your opponent's on top of you, to be turned over onto your back and potentially pinned. So keep your head up. And that's a great analogy for life, because what happens when our head goes down?
We feel down.
Exactly. Because it does things not just psychologically to us, but physiologically to us. When we have this weak, deflated posture, it drops our testosterone. It drops our creativity. It drops our endurance and strength. It drops our concentration. It has these deletory, it drops our immunity. Now, conversely, I get my head up, I get my shoulders back, I get my chest out, I take a strong, powerful stance. What happens? The converse. My testosterone goes up, my cortisol goes down, my concentration goes up, my strength and endurance go up, my immunity goes up by changing my physiology. Now I feel I can tackle this. How do I feel here? Deflated, weak, wimpy. You look at somebody who's exhausted, tired, defeated, depressed, discouraged. What kind of posture do they take? Here.
Yeah, it's basically a feedback loop you're talking about. Because your thoughts, your feelings are going to affect your energy, and your energy is going to affect your body. And then you can use it also the other way around. You can use your body, whether it's through movement, breathing, what have you.
Yep.
That to affect energy, which affects then your mind.
Absolutely. Psychology follows physiology. Physiology follows psychology. The mind-body connection. You cannot separate one from the other. So keep your head up. The coach is speaking into your life. We all need these people in our lives at times in our life when we are struggling that remind us, keep your head up. So determination, just keep working at it. Persistence. Yes. I think the other thing that athletics taught me and you may agree with this, Elvis, is that hard work can trump natural ability. I saw so many other wrestlers in my career in junior high and especially in high school that were so much more gifted than I was, much stronger, more coordinated, they were more explosive. I mean, they had athletic gifts that I could only dream about. But they were lazy. They were not willing to work. And I far surpassed them. Why? Because I worked so much harder. I can remember as my high school career went on, there were kids that were behind me for a few years, and they'd say, Skip, I wish I could be as good as you. And I think to myself, no, you don't, because you're not willing to work as hard as me. You're not in the weight room when I'm there. You're not running in the mornings with me. You're not spending time at lunchtime going out and running sprints. You're not going to summer tournaments with me and my two buddies. You're not doing the work. I'm thinking, you may say that, but you really don't want to because you're not willing to work. And that's the reality.
That's a really good point. Like I mentioned before, many times when people see someone as successful, or like Bruce Lee, David Goggins, they'll say he's crazy, he's super talented, But like you said, even if someone's really actually talented, you can always outwork them.
All right, so you got to show up. You got to do the work.
Yeah.
You got to be consistent. All those things are so important. But the other thing, and unfortunately, my youngest brother, Chris, who was much better wrestler, had far more success than I was. He was a Division I All-American and won so much more in terms of wrestling than I did. But we overtrained as we look back in our careers. We could have trained less and done better, but we overtrained. We didn't know how to do the train rest cycles and peak and then taper. And it was just this relentless train and train some more. And now we're paying for it in terms of our joints.
Yeah.
But that importance of knowing how to really push, but then knowing how to rest. And I think that's an important thing. And I think nowadays, especially in college programs and elite programs, they really understand that so much better, how to actively rest. So they're doing on the rest days, maybe a very light workout, or they might just do a light cycling. They use ice baths, they use saunas, they have masseuses. You know, they have these modalities available to them to help them recover. So the importance of recovery, and we need that in our lives just as much we need that in athletics. And like I talked about, keeping that awareness. Where are these various bank accounts, these various stores, emotionally, socially, spiritually, physically, and where am I at in these areas? And how now do I replenish these areas? And so that recovery phase is so important. And so being aware, the awareness, and then building in recovery phase. You go through some very difficult times in your life, very stressful times. How do you build in some recovery after that? And I think we fail miserably in that. For instance, after a death, you have the preparations for a funeral. You have the viewing. You have the service, the funeral service. You have the burial. And then people are thinking, okay, get on with your normal life in a few weeks. It doesn't work like that. Grief doesn't work like that. Excuse me, I thought I had that on. It's important to understand that it takes time to recover. I thought I had my phone off, so forgive me.
That's all right.
The importance of active recovery is so important in our lives. But the other is the importance of teamwork, having some teammates along the way. That yes, wrestling's an individual sport, but you have a training partner. Mm-hmm. You have teammates there.
And your coach.
And you have your coach. And so you have a team that you work with. And you are only, in many ways, going to be as good as your training partner makes you and pushes you, and as your coach helps you. Sure, you can be working really, really hard, but if you don't have a good training partner, there's limitations to how good you're going to be. If you don't have a real good coach that can help you point out things, you're not doing that right, Skip. You need to approach this differently. Or you keep doing this in a match, and that's what keeps getting you in trouble. Things of this sort, things you cannot see, things you don't understand, then you're going to run into problems. And so we need that team. We need people helping us, and we talked about that along the way. I think those are some of the great lessons that sports teach us.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure,
right. One thing I wanted to ask you, you didn't talk much about how you got into wrestling later in your life.
Yes. In 2012, it was a year after I came back from the deployment from Iraq. I still had the wrestling blood in me. I was 56 years old, going on 57. And I'm sitting up in the stands with my wife, Sherry, my youngest son, Joey. Joey was 18. His wrestling career had ended. Unfortunately, he would have been up on the wrestling medalist stat, I think top 3 in the state, had he not been injured and ill. But we're watching the state finals, and I had picked up a wrestling magazine, was opening it and looking at dates, and there what was Veterans Nationals, I think it was May 5th and 6th, Tucson, Arizona. And this is mid-February. We're sitting up there. And I look at the dates. I turn to Joe and I say, son, I'd like to compete. Will you train with me? He looks at me and goes, okay, Dad, but you're going to have to do everything I tell you. What 18-year-old would like to say that to their dad? So Joey became my training partner, my trainer, and my coach. And we trained. Now, I was in very good shape because I used to work out really, really hard. And I was in exceptional shape for a man my age. But wrestling's a different beast. And we get out on the mat. And Joey, we'd practice, but then we'd scrimmage. And I'd come home from practice, and it's like, I need kind of. And I tell Sherry, I think I'm going to go soak in the tub. And then afterwards, I'd have an ice pack here on my elbows or on my knees. And she'd joke with me, okay, old man, do you think you had enough yet? You think you had enough yet, old man? It's like, no, not yet. Not yet. So for about the first 6 weeks, that's the way it was. And I added an early morning workout because I needed to bring my weight down to the class I was going to wrestle in, the 58 kilo class, about 127 and a half pounds. And so I've got that. And every morning, for those first several weeks, I'd get up and my feet would hit the ground. It's like, it's like, get your body moving, Skip. And I go out there. And so we get on the mats about 3 days a week, still weightlifting, still doing my conditioning, my early morning workouts. But slowly my body's getting wrestling tough. And I remember about the 6-week mark, I get up one morning, I get dressed, get outside to do my workout. It's like, man, I am feeling good. I am feeling really good. I remember saying, son, you better bring your A game today because the old man is feeling good. He is feeling really good. And so we picked up the intensity and we'd go tooth and nail. Oh my gosh, we'd go hard. I remember one time Joey caught me. He's several inches taller than I am. I shot in on a takedown. I didn't complete it. And he caught me in one of his signature move. It's a reverse headlock. So he had my chin here, and he's, like I say, taller. And so he's cranking on my neck, like, and he throws me on my back. Oh my gosh, that was painful. And I determined I'm never going to get caught in that move again. And I never did from him. It was like, okay, I shoot a takedown. It's got to be clean and crisp because I do not want to get my head ripped off like that. So we'd have some great battles and I trained hard, went out to Tucson. And that in itself is a whole story because of the problems with the flights and so forth. We were supposed to get in mid-afternoon. We didn't get in till the wee hours of the night. We didn't get in until about 2 a.m. Because of the flight delays and stuff. But it worked out. Our training paid off, won a national championship. And afterwards, Joey and I are standing here posing. In fact, I have the picture of it in my book. We're standing here posing for a picture with the trophy. And Dad, was it worth it? All those hot baths, all those ice packs. Yeah, son, that was worth it. I had a blast. Then the following year, I was a national runner-up. I ran into this Russian, and he beat me.
Happens.
So, then I do some coaching. Like I said, I did some coaching. Still keep my finger a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, vast majority of people would benefit so much if they would do something like this. You know, it doesn't have to be wrestling, obviously, but even just some, weightlifting or some kind of exercise, calisthenics. Because at the end of the day, it just improves your quality of life so much, whether it's your mental states and physically. As you age, that's tremendous help.
Absolutely.
Keeps your muscles in shape, so that if you fall over, you're not going to die because of that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
you can
And
still do.
Mhm. And as we age, it's even more important. There's a phenomenon called sarcopenia, which means loss of muscle mass. And you look at the little old people, have trouble getting up out of their chairs. And, they walk very tentatively and can't, climb up steps hardly and so forth. Well, these are the people most at risk to fall, break a hip, hurt themselves, and they lose functionality. And, broken hip can be the beginning of the end for so many of these people, but you lose functionality. And so strength is essential. Muscle mass is essential as we age. So the importance of regular, intense, resistance training becomes essential to maintain muscle mass, maintain strength.
Yeah, two things I want to point out. Yeah, when you're older, you fall over, or when you're younger, the thing that saves you is the fast twitch muscle fibers, which react quickly. And because you're aging, you lose those muscles. So now that when you fall over, there's nothing to save you, really.
Yeah, you can't react. Your balance goes off. Those fast twitch are not there. You can't react. You end up, like you say, getting hurt. I was listening to a podcast, and it was looking at data from some studies, particularly a newer study it's out of Sweden, in fact, and 272,000, and then they took a cohort of about 4,800, and they compared the very active, highly fit individuals versus those who weren't fit, had larger waist sizes and body fat. And then they looked at rates of COVID, hospitalizations, deaths, and so forth. And that correlation, when they controlled for other factors, diabetes, asthma, smoking, etc. So they controlled for all those factors. But what they found was a striking difference between those who were regular exercises and fit with lower body fat, lower belly, waist circumferences, by virtue of the exercise, they regular exercise because their VO2 max, the ability to consume exercise based on, they were regular exercisers, so they could exercise more intensely. That rate of COVID, catching COVID, having complications, ending up hospitalized, ending up in the ICU and dying, there was a marked difference. So again, exercise helps protect us from disease. And so it was a really interesting study, and the podcaster alluded to other studies talking about that out of other reputable institutions that aren't necessarily making it into mainstream media, that for whatever reasons. But exercise is important for our health and well-being, and especially during this pandemic, both mentally and physically.
Yeah, the problem is with exercise, big pharma can't really make that much money out of it. So yeah. And the other thing that I would say on this topic, people think that as you age, it's inevitable that you're gonna put on a lot of weight. But even that comes down to the muscle mass. Because if you're aging, you're losing your muscle mass, and you're still gonna eat the same amount of calories, roughly. Even though you don't have that much muscle anymore, you're gonna put on weight. So the way to counteract it is by doing some training.
Maintain the muscle mass.
Yep.
Don't eat as much in terms of calories. Sometimes as you get older, I used to eat mass quantities when I was young. I used to eat a lot. I can't eat that much anymore. It's no way.
All right. Almost at the end. So the 3 questions that I'm going to ask every
All right.
podcast. So first one, what does masculinity mean to you?
Masculinity means that there's 2 sides to this. There is this, if you will, this strong, protective, decisive side to masculinity, this tough side here. But there's also this tender side that can cry, this side that can express those emotions. I'm sad. I'm discouraged. I'm disappointed. Or even, I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm confused. Or I'm angry, but I'm not going to lash out. Or I'm hurt. That really hurt me. So you have this side that can be tender and express emotions properly. Tough, protective, provider side, if you will, and the tender, emotive side. And so to be truly masculine, we need to learn to express both sides of our being, because we are a total being. And for too long, we've expressed this side as men. And our emotions that we've expressed have been so limited. We've allowed ourselves to express anger, elation, go team, yeah! And not much in love, perhaps, to a limited form. But this other tender, tears, I'm confused. I'm sad. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. We haven't allowed ourselves to express this side. And until we do, we are not going to be a truly masculine man.
Good answer. The only thing I would add, it's kind of like yin yang. You are strong. You can be aggressive if needed to be. You're a leader. But you are all those things are a place from unconditional love.
Indeed. Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Second question. If there was one advice you could give to people, just one, what would it be?
One piece of advice, if I could give to you, and it's very simple, taken from the great commandment. Love God and love others as you love yourself. Because I think in that you cannot go wrong. Because loving God means living for a purpose so much greater than yourself. Loving others as you love yourselves means you've got to love yourself. You've got to take care of yourself. You've got to be kind to yourself. You've got to know how to speak well of yourself, how to be gentle with yourself. And that way, then, you have something overflowing to be kind and gentle and generous towards others, knowing how to draw appropriate boundaries when necessary, knowing how to draw those boundaries against toxic things. You don't want to take poison into your life. So why do you want to be around people that are poisonous or situations that are toxic? So again, Jesus said, love the Lord thy God, and said the two greatest commandments, love God and love your neighbor as yourself.
Very nice. Which leads me to a last question, the easiest one. What do you think is the meaning of life?
Oh, the meaning of life. Oh, wow. My life verse is out of Micah 6:8. He hath shown thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God.
Beautiful. Right. Where can people find you and also your book?
People could find me most easily at my Facebook page and on Twitter at Skip, SKIP WNW, at Skip WNW. And you can find my book most easily on Amazon. Wrestling Depression is Not for Whimps.
Great. I'll put all the links in the description. And to your listeners, thank you for listening to us. It was a great conversation. And yeah, until next time, love you.